Here is a small list of some of the problems I have seen while watching other YouTube videos. And the reason why I'm going to make a few videos like this in the future will be to help people build better products with what they have available to them and in their time zones or weather conditions. So let's go ahead and get started with the first thing that I see and I don't really understand, and that's the fact that I like to use building hardware that is embedded into the concrete. And that piece of building hardware will look something like this here. Now, I do understand that something like this might be a little pricey. And the reason why you might use something like this or even a different, cheaper version. So with that said, I need to point out, and this is something I just do not understand, is why people don't use an anchor bolt like this instead of drilling a hole into an existing concrete foundation pier that might have just been poured a few weeks ago or even a few days ago. And if we're going to do a price comparison, I'm pretty sure that an anchor bolt like this is going to be cheaper than an anchor that you're going to drill into a newly poured concrete pier. And again, a standoff plate is going to be preferred in most cases for something like this. However, I did have somebody tell me that they didn't trust the weight above. They didn't think that this would support the load. And if that's a concern of yours, then contact the product manufacturer for more information. I won't be able to provide you with that. And of course, this is what it would look like if you installed the anchor bolt first. Another problem that you might concern yourself with would be to use a sloping footing that will allow water to drain away from the wood instead of something like this right here. And if you are going to slope the top of the footing, then you could always use a different post base bracket. And of course, the third example here is what inspired me to make this video. I came across a deck that was built with 2x4 floor joist and 4x4s spread out like this. And it seemed like they used quite a bit of 4x4s to get the support, maybe so that they could use 2x4s for the deck joists. And I understand that thinking. However, these individuals also built this directly on top of a yard that had grass, and that grass eventually will decompose and lower your deck. And your main concern if you built a deck like this would be whether or not it lowered the entire deck or simply lowered a few sections of the deck. So here we can see where all of the 4x4s are sitting on top of the solid surface. However, I'm here to tell you that if this surface is not solid and can allow the 4x4s to sink into the soil, then you're going to end up with some big problems with your deck. And one of those problems might eventually end up looking something like this, where you have a section of the deck, maybe a corner, maybe it's in the middle, that will dip into the soil and deform the materials, especially if you're using 2x4s. Number 4 on my list will be whether or not you're going to install plastic and the reason why you are installing the plastic. So for one, if you're going to install it to prevent weeds from growing underneath your deck, then you might want to use a weed screen. And this is a product that will allow moisture or water to go through it, but realistically won't allow weeds to grow unless debris or dirt gets on top of it. Then you'll have weeds growing. Now, if you're going to use plastic, then you're going to need to consider the drainage. And this is the problem that I've seen on the other YouTube videos. And most people might not even realize it, especially if you have a deck and some type of a wall around the perimeter of the deck that won't allow you to see under here. However, you probably will be able to see all of the bugs coming out of the gaps in between the deck eventually, or you might get a horrible smell. So if you are going to use plastic, make sure that it's sloping and then make sure that it is not going to be sloping next to an area where it could create problems. And one of those areas would be a concrete support footing. Number 5 on my list, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get a lot of slack from this one here, is whether or not to use pressure treated lumber, or whether or not to use pressure treated lumber throughout the entire project. And this is another problem that I see. So first off, if you're going to use pressure treated lumber, then why not use it throughout the entire project? And my thinking behind that would be that if you need pressure treated lumber because you have a problem with a lot of moisture in your area or insects, you might have a problem with termites, which leads me to my next problem, and that's the fact that you need to make sure you're using the correct pressure treated lumber. So just don't go down to your local home improvement center and buy what they have there without checking to make sure that it is not rated for interior use only. And that's usually what most homeowners end up doing. They end up going down and buying what they have, thinking that all pressure treated lumber is created equal. Number 6 on our list will be corrosive or non-corrosive building hardware and fasteners. And trust me, I've seen a lot of problems with fasteners rusting. And yes, this is rust in my drawing, not something that matches the wood. So let's not rule out that something like this could be a benefit sometimes also. However, it's not going to be a benefit when these fasteners rust and corrode to the point where they are no longer doing their job and staining the lumber or other materials you might be using for your deck. Next up, let's take a look at number 7 and something that you should use a little common sense when trying to figure out. And that would be the fact that you don't know what the deck someone else is building on YouTube is going to look like 2 or 3 years or even 10 years later. Which brings me back to the fact that if you really don't know what you're doing, you're going to have to do a lot more research or bite the bullet and contact your local building and safety department to see if they have any pamphlets or even get a building permit to where you can get professionals in your area involved in your project to prevent you from doing something that you saw on a YouTube video that has millions of views and lots of comments saying what an awesome job the person did. Which brings me to number 8 on my list, and that's the fact that you might be looking at a deck being built in an area where it snows, or in an area where you have a lot of moisture, or an area where you might have a lot of moisture for about 3 months out of the year. However, you've been watching videos on how people build decks in warmer climates. And this is a problem that I have ran into in the past, giving advice about building decks in Southern California where I don't have to deal with the ground freezing. However, this isn't going to be the case for someone who might live in Canada. So definitely something else to consider while you're watching any videos about any project you're trying to build. And this information could also apply to building materials. And this is a problem that I've ran into in the past by watching videos from other countries. Which brings me to item 9 on the list, and that would be burying a post either in the soil or even digging a hole and then setting a post in the ground and then surrounding it with either concrete or gravel. And of course, in colder climates, it will be required to dig deeper into the ground so that the footing can be installed below the frost line, and of course provides us with a perfect example of working in colder or warmer climates, where, for example, you might be watching a video to where they're burying a post in the ground and surrounding the post with gravel, which might not provide the best method for building a deck in Southern California. However, might provide you with a time-tested, proven method that will work in the colder climates. And now for our last and final problem that I seem to find a lot on the internet. This will be number 10, and that will be the lumber spacing, 16 inches on center, 24 inches on center, 12 inches on center, and of course the size of the lumber, 2x6, 2x8. And even though I will not be able to provide you with the specific sizes you're going to need for the lumber or the spacing of that lumber, I would strongly suggest reading reading the installation instructions for any of the decking you're going to use. That will provide you with the minimum spacing required for the deck joist. And I hate to say it, but I have seen 24 inches on center before, and I've seen this more than once. And I would like to point out that 16 inches on center is probably going to work a little better. However, let's not forget that you might even need to space them a little closer, and this might not have anything to do with the product manufacturer and everything to do with the structural engineer or local building codes. Which brings me to the end of the video, and feel free to let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the things I mentioned, or if you know something I don't about reasons why somebody does or does not do something I mentioned in this video.